Hello again. It's me. And yes, I received more letters. 5 stories this time, 5 nights that turned ordinary jobs into nightmares. Proof, once again, that safety is only an illusion. I'll read them to you, one by one. And if you're brave enough to stay until the end, you'll understand why the night shift is never really quiet. The guest with the knife. I was 19 when I landed what I thought would be the easiest job in the world. My buddy Ethan called me one afternoon while I was scrolling through job listings and said, "Why don't you come work with me?" He was a night clerk at a rundown roadside motel. Nothing fancy, rooms were $50 a night, $250 for the week. I needed the money, and he promised the night shifts were quiet. Most of the time, he told me, you'll just be scrolling on your phone. Maybe a guest or two shows up. That's it. It sounded too simple to be true. And I'd soon learn why. The motel looked worse in person than in Ethan's stories. A faded sign buzzed with half-dead neon. The office was really just a converted storage room, plastic folding table as a desk, loose paperwork scattered everywhere. The manager, Mr. Keller, was friendly enough, if a little off. He said he and his wife were going out of town and needed someone trained fast. I'd shadow him for 3 days, then work one overnight with Ethan. After that, I'd be alone. The training wasn't hard. Check guests in, fill out forms, process cards, clean rooms if needed. Ethan helped me through my first shift, and it went smoothly. By the time I walked in for my first solo overnight, I was nervous, but not scared. That changed quickly. For the first few hours, nothing happened. A single call came from a woman asking if rooms were available. She said she'd call back. Otherwise, the place was silent. Then, just after 2 a.m., a car pulled into the lot. A man got out, moving slowly, like he was half asleep, or half drunk. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair matted with sweat. When he stepped inside, he stared around as if he didn't know where he was. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked. He locked eyes with me. His stare was vacant, almost childlike. After a long silence, he muttered, "Room." I gave him a form. He handed over his ID and credit card without a word. As I typed his information, I noticed him swatting at the air beside his face, like he was fighting off invisible flies. His movements were jerky, frantic. I pretended not to notice, handed him a key, and wished him a good night. He didn't respond. Just walked away. I told myself it was over. But 10 minutes later, shouting echoed down the hall. The man stormed back into the office, eyes wild. "Why won't you let me in my room?" he screamed. I froze. He slammed the key onto the desk, accusing me of tricking him. I apologized, tried to stay calm, and handed him a new key. He snatched it, cursed under his breath, and stomped out. My heart pounded. I knew something was wrong. 5 minutes later he was back. Louder. Angrier. He shoved at the office door so hard I thought it would break off the hinges. I panicked, slipped into the tiny storage room behind the desk, and locked it. The sound of fists pounded against the door. His voice raged through the walls. "Cure! Someone has to cure me!" I couldn't even breathe. I wanted to call the police, but it was my first night. Would Mr. Keller think I couldn't handle it? Still trembling, I shouted through the door that I'd help him personally, that I'd walk him to his room. My voice cracked, but it seemed to calm him. The pounding stopped. When I opened the door, he stood there grinning, sweat dripping down his face. His eyes followed me as I led him to the hallway. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced he'd attacked me. But when we reached his room, he suddenly stopped several doors down. "Here," he said flatly, pointing. That's when I realized the truth. He'd been trying to open the wrong door the whole time. Both keys I'd given him were fine. He just wasn't at his assigned room. I swallowed hard, forced a smile, and walked to the correct door. I slid the key into the lock, opened it wide, and gestured inside. For the first time, he looked genuinely confused. Then, without a word, he stepped inside and shut the door. I sprinted back to the office, hands shaking so badly I dropped the clipboard on the floor. For the rest of the shift I sat frozen behind the desk, staring at the security feed, waiting for him to return. He never did. By the next night, the man had checked out. I never saw him again. But the sound of his fists on that office door still haunts me. The hollow, splintering thuds. The way his voice cracked when he screamed about the cure. The wild shine in his eyes when I finally opened that door. Because when you're 19 and alone in a dingy motel at 2 a.m., the line between customer and predator blurs fast. One moment he was just a guest asking for a room. The next, he was a man pounding at the walls, and I was certain he'd break through. Even now, I wonder what would have happened if he had gotten inside. Would I have survived the night? Or just become another forgotten news story, a clerk found dead at the front desk of a roadside motel? That was my first real night shift. And it taught me something I'll never forget. You don't always need monsters to feel fear. Sometimes all it takes is a stranger at your door with the wrong key. But if you think that's terrifying, just wait. Because the next story isn't about someone confused or delusional. It's about a man who knew exactly what he wanted. And what he wanted was to break inside. The man at the glass door. I was 22 when I got hired in the IT department of a large retail center. It wasn't glamorous, but I was proud of it. I was the only woman in the department and wanted to prove myself. The job gave me two choices for shifts, the standard 9 to 5, or 4 days a week, 2 p.m. to midnight. I picked the second. 10-hour shifts meant 3 days off, and I thought the evenings would be quiet. What I didn't realize is how terrifying it is to be the only person left in a massive building once the clock strikes 6 and everyone else goes home. By 8 or 9 p.m., the phones usually stopped ringing. Our customers were mostly other businesses, and after hours, nothing much happened. The silence of the building was unnerving, but I convinced myself I'd get used to it. Sometimes I went down to the basement for snacks from the vending machines. I hated that basement. It had a row of windows facing the woods. Just endless black trees, pressing against the glass like something waiting to get in. That night, I was exhausted and decided a soda might keep me awake. I forwarded my work phone to my cell and walked down the hall. The basement was silent. I grabbed my drink and turned when I heard it. Bang! Something slammed against the glass. I jumped so hard I dropped the soda. My heart raced, eyes snapping to the windows. But there was only darkness. A trick of the night? A bird? A branch? I told myself anything except the truth I already felt. Someone was there. I ran back upstairs and locked myself in the IT office. Minutes passed. I stared at the front entrance, just visible from my desk. That's when I saw him. A man. Tall, his face shadowed, hands cupped against the glass as he tried to see inside. The moment our eyes met, my stomach dropped. He yanked the handles. Rattled them hard. Then, furious, he began pounding his fists against the glass. I ducked under the desk, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, that officers were on the way. But every second dragged like an eternity. Then, another sound. Crash. I peeked up just in time to see him lift a rock the size of his head and slam it against the glass. Cracks spiderwebbed across the door. He was trying to break his way in. I couldn't stop shaking. My voice cracked as I whispered to the dispatcher, begging them to hurry. The dispatcher asked me to check if he'd made it inside. I lifted my head just enough to see a jagged hole high up on the door. Not enough to climb through yet, but soon. And then, silence. The pounding stopped. The man was gone. For a moment, I thought he had given up. But then the dispatcher told me to stay low. The police were seconds away. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Relief surged through me as officers stormed the front entrance. But when they looked around, the man was gone. He'd vanished into the forest behind the building. The cracks in the glass were the only proof he'd been there at all. I quit that job within a month. I couldn't handle being alone in that building again. But sometimes at night, when the wind rattles the windows of my apartment, I remember his hands on the glass, and the way he stared, like I was already his. Because that's what it felt like. Not random. Not an accident. Like he had chosen me. And sometimes, when I walk home late at night, I swear I see him in the reflections of shop windows. A shadow just standing there, waiting. That night taught me something awful. Locks and alarms don't always keep danger out. Sometimes they just delay it. But if you think being hunted through glass is terrifying, the next story is even worse. Because the next time danger struck, it wasn't a stranger pounding at the door. It was a man who grabbed me by the arm, out in the open. And this time, running was the only chance I had. The man at the corner. I've always worked the night shift. Midnight to 8 a.m. A routine that seemed manageable, until the night that nearly changed everything. I don't drive. The bus ride takes about half an hour, and the metro station is only a 5-minute walk from my apartment. Normally, I don't mind. Even in winter, even in the dark, I'd gotten used to it. But what happened that night made me realize how dangerous 5 minutes can be. It was January, bitter cold, snow piled along the sidewalks. My boyfriend had been hanging out in my apartment, helping me pass the time before work. We talked, lost track of the clock, and suddenly I had less than 10 minutes to make the train. His car was buried under fresh snow, windshield frozen solid. He offered to drive me, but I told him I'd walk. It was faster than digging out the car, and besides, I'd walked that route hundreds of times. I kissed him goodbye and pulled my coat tight. The air burned with every breath, sharp against my lungs. Streetlights buzzed weakly, their halos glowing in the icy mist. The neighborhood wasn't the best, but I'd never felt unsafe before. Until that night. There's one stretch of the walk I always hated, a corner just before the station. Unlike the other blocks, it had no stores, no lit windows, just one long fence and shadows that seemed to swallow the light. As I hurried around that corner, head down, thinking only about the time, a hand clamped around my arm. I gasped so hard the air cut my throat. A man, tall, maybe in his 40s, yanked me toward him. His grip was like iron. Before I could even scream, his other hand shot toward my wrist. Pure instinct saved me. I jerked my elbow back as hard as I could, ramming it into his stomach. He let out a grunt, loosened his hold, and for a split second I was free. I ran. My boots slipped on the ice as I sprinted toward the metro entrance. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps, fast, heavy, closing in. I slammed through the station doors, my breath fogging in the cold air, and spun around. He was still there. Still coming. The station was nearly empty, just a dimly lit lobby echoing with my gasps. I bolted down the hallway and burst through a side exit, out onto the opposite street. Snow crunched behind me. He hadn't stopped. I ran harder than I ever have in my life. My lungs felt like they were tearing apart, every muscle screaming. But the thought of his hands on me again pushed me forward. By some miracle, I reached my apartment block. And there, like fate, was my boyfriend, still in the parking lot, brushing snow off his car. I dove inside, yanking the passenger door shut. My words tumbled out, broken, frantic. He grabbed me, he followed me, call the police. We did. Officers arrived and took my statement. I gave them the best description I could, mid-40s, dark coat, rough face, tall. But deep down I knew how unlikely it was they'd find him. And they never did. For weeks, I couldn't walk that corner without feeling phantom fingers closing around my arm. Every time I passed the station entrance, I half expected him to be there, waiting in the shadows. I still take the metro to work, but now I carry pepper spray, clutched in my fist from the moment I leave my apartment until I'm safely inside the station. I don't trust the dark anymore. Because I learned something that night. Monsters don't always wait inside your house. Sometimes they wait on the street you walk every day. And sometimes all it takes is one careless second, one blind corner, to change everything. That man could have dragged me away. He could have pulled me into the shadows, and no one would have heard me scream. And the worst part? I never even saw him coming. For weeks after, I kept asking myself, what if I hadn't gotten free? What if he'd caught me inside that station? It's a thought that still chills me, because sometimes an attack ends in seconds, but the fear never leaves. But if you think being grabbed by a stranger on a dark corner is terrifying, wait until you hear what happened next. Because the next story isn't about a man who disappears into the night. It's about one who keeps coming back. Again. And again. Until the only thing scarier than his face is knowing he won't let you escape. The man who wouldn't let go. I used to work as a dancer. A job people like to joke about, but for me, it was survival, fast money to pay bills, to eat, to get through the week. After about a year, I had it down to a routine. A couple of clubs, both day and night shifts, regulars who tipped well. From time to time, we all dealt with clingy customers. Security was there to step in if anyone crossed the line, but most nights, I could handle myself. Until him. He came in on a Tuesday. Rough-looking guy, trucker type. The kind who smelled like cigarettes and long highways. From the second he walked through the door, his eyes locked on me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Men pick favorites. It's part of the business. I approached him, made small talk, and he bought a private dance. Easy money. He told me he was only in town 3 nights a month. That was perfect for me, short term, no strings. I even told him the other clubs I worked at, thinking he might become another decent regular. And he did. For 3 nights in a row, he showed up wherever I was. Always choosing me. Always asking for the VIP room. He started telling me things. How he wanted to save me from this life. How I should move in with him. How I didn't belong here. It was flattering for about 2 seconds, and then it became terrifying. When I finally told him I wasn't even into men, that I had a girlfriend, he didn't care. His face stayed the same. His grip on my arm didn't loosen. He just smiled, like he knew better than I did. Weeks passed, and I almost forgot him. Until he came back. Only this time, he was different. Grabby. More insistent. Whispering in my ear about how I was meant for him. I tried switching shifts, bouncing between clubs, but he always found me. Always. The last night I saw him still makes my stomach twist. I was finishing my set on stage when I saw him walking in. My heart dropped. I tried to get off the stage fast, to hide in the back, but his eyes had already found me. He marched straight toward me, smiling like he owned me. "You're coming with me tonight," he said loud enough that people turned to look. I told him no. Again. My voice shaking. And then, before I could move, he grabbed me. Lifted me off the ground like I weighed nothing. Threw me over his shoulder. I screamed. Kicked. Pounded my fists against his back. But he didn't stop. He carried me toward the door, step after step, like he was taking out the trash. I thought, this is it. This is how women disappear. Then, like a miracle, the door opened from the outside. One of the bouncers walked in after escorting another girl to her car. He saw me immediately, saw the terror in my eyes, heard my screams. He tore me from the man's grip and shoved him back. I collapsed to the floor, sobbing. The guy tried to laugh it off. "I was just joking," he said, hands raised. "We were just messing around." But I knew. I knew what he was trying to do. Security threw him out, warned him never to come back. But the image of his face, smirking, unbothered, burned into me. I hid backstage for an hour before they finally walked me to my car. And that night, I decided I couldn't do it anymore. I took months off, told every club to lie if he ever came looking. She quit, they said. She's gone. Eventually, he disappeared. Or maybe he just found someone else. I worked for a couple more years before moving on to a different life. But even now, whenever I feel footsteps too close behind me, or see headlights slowing down on the street, I remember him. The way he smiled while carrying me toward that door. The way he looked at me like I was already his. And I wonder how many women never made it as far as I did. Because sometimes stalkers don't hide in the shadows. Sometimes they walk right into your job, pay at the door, and smile as they tell you they own you. That was the night I learned something terrifying. When someone decides you belong to them, there's no such thing as safe. But as horrifying as it was to be carried toward the door, the next story is even worse. Because at least I had security watching my back. In the next story, a woman on the night shift had no one. No bouncers. No backup. Just a strange man in the lobby. And the sickening realization that his madness was only beginning. The man in the lobby. Working nights at a hotel was supposed to be boring. That's why I liked it. Slow, uneventful shifts, a chance to watch TV behind the front desk while the rest of the world slept. But sometimes the quiet hides something far worse than noise. It was late, maybe 2 a.m., when I first noticed him. A guest I hadn't spoken to before, tall, pale, unshaven. He walked up to the desk without a word and just stared at me. For several seconds he didn't blink. He just looked at me like he was waiting for something. "Can I help you?" I finally asked. He tilted his head and muttered one word. "Coffee." I pointed to the breakfast area behind him, where we kept a fresh pot. "Right there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But he didn't turn around. He just stood there, breathing heavy. Finally, he asked if I could bring the coffee up to his room. I told him I could give him instant packets instead. He agreed, and I handed them over. And still, he didn't move. Just stared at me for another 10 seconds before walking away. My skin crawled. Something about him was wrong. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I'd seen worse. But a few minutes later, I caught him again, outside the lobby this time. Standing by the window, smoking, watching me. His eyes followed my every move through the glass. When he finished his cigarette, he walked off into the dark. I exhaled in relief. But then he came back. Over and over. In and out. Smoking, pacing, staring. Every time, his gaze locked on me like he was studying me. Measuring me. Finally, he stopped in the middle of the lobby. Just stood there, breathing, his eyes never leaving mine. I asked if he needed anything. He didn't answer. The silence stretched until I thought I'd scream. That's when she appeared. A woman in her 60s, storming into the lobby in her nightgown. She glared at him. "You woke me up," she snapped. "We're leaving. Go pack your things." He turned toward her, anger flashing across his face. "I'm not leaving. Go back upstairs." They argued in front of me like I wasn't there. She kept insisting. He kept refusing. My hands shook under the desk as I tried to look busy, terrified of what he might do if she pushed too hard. Finally, with a growl, he stomped off toward the elevators. The woman turned to me, and her expression softened. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "He's my son. He's schizophrenic. I've been trying to get him help, but he won't take his medication. Tonight he's worse than usual. I knew we had to leave." I nodded, forcing a smile. My heart was still racing. We talked for a few minutes, about her struggles, about how she was the only person he had. She looked exhausted, worn down by years of carrying the weight of someone else's demons. I almost started to feel sorry for him. Until he came back. He burst into the lobby, eyes wild, face twisted in rage. And this time, his anger was directed at me. "You think you're better than me?" he screamed. "You think you can look at me like that?" His words made no sense, a stream of insults and gibberish. He slammed his fist against the desk so hard the pens rattled. I froze. My throat closed. His mother grabbed his arm, begging him to stop, to calm down. Somehow, miraculously, she pulled him back. He muttered one last curse at me, then followed her out into the night. For the rest of my shift, I sat in silence, staring at the door, waiting for him to return. He didn't. By sunrise, they had checked out and vanished. And though I never saw him again, the memory never left me. The way he stared at me through the glass. The way he stood in silence, waiting. The sudden explosion of rage that made me feel, for the first time at that job, that I wasn't safe. That night, I learned something important. Hotels are never really empty. Behind every locked door, every drawn curtain, there could be someone whose mind has slipped away, someone unpredictable, someone dangerous. And when you're the only one at the front desk, you're not just the clerk. You're the target. This was the final story. But if you've stayed with me through all 5, you already know, these aren't just stories. They're warnings. Because the truth is, the next shadow outside your window, the next stranger who lingers too long, the next set of footsteps echoing in the dark, might not be part of a story at all. It might be you. Let me know what you think in the comments. This was Tell Me What Happened. I'll see you in the next story.